leveling the explosive charge of the Indian government's complicity in the killing of the Khalistani separatist leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar on June 18th in Surrey, British Columbia, Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has gone for broke. In the process, he has perhaps irretrievably damaged India Canada relations, at least as long as he is the Prime Minister. Coming back from this precipice for the two countries could take years. What is remarkable is that Trudeau chose to make the allegations citing his intelligence service, but without providing any specific evidence. However, Bob Rae, Canada's ambassador to the United Nations, has spoken about quiet diplomacy that preceded Trudeau's parliamentary statement, but without any results. In order to understand the state of the Nijjar investigation, without any arrests or even a formal police statement, Mayank Chhaya Reports spoke to the well-known Canadian journalist and writer Terry Milewski, who has spent decades tracking the Khalistani movement outside India. Quite clearly, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is going for broke on this issue. That's my sense. Do you think he has such damning evidence that he feels confident to risk permanently damaging relations with India?
Well, he better, because otherwise he's through. I think that if he fails to fill this gaping hole in his presentation, that hole being the evidence, if he fails to fill it, I don't see how he can survive. He has tried to strike back against the humiliation that he suffered in New Delhi at the G20 at the hands of Prime Minister Modi, who basically delivered a sharp punch in the nose over this issue. And he is fighting back by saying, oh, okay, I've got you. Your government is involved in murder in my country. And if he cannot prove it, then I don't see how he can survive. He's already at a very low ebb, as you well know, in the polls. If there were an election held tomorrow, the Conservative Party would win it handily, according to those polls. And he doesn't want to antagonize his partners in his minority government, the people who are sustaining his government in power, the NDP, which is led by Jagmeet Singh, who is a Khalistani sympathizer. So the electoral math, if you will, says don't rock the boat, try to keep the coalition such as it is, the alliance with the NDP together, and go after India. You're going to be a hero if you can prove this. But what if he can't? If he can't prove it, or there is his evidence proves faulty or insufficient, or the Indians can punch a hole in it, then, as I say, I think that this could be the end of his prime ministership. I don't see how he could survive that. He's got the whole world on edge now with this, and he cannot answer questions by saying it's classified, I don't want to rock the boat in the investigation. He's already done that. He's announced the conclusion of the investigation, if you really get right down to it, by saying, we've found out who the villains are. And this is doubly difficult to prove, given that, have you noticed that we haven't yet heard anything from the police investigating this matter? Have they, for example, charged the shooters? Never mind who paid them, but the shooters. This is how it goes in Surrey, British Columbia. There is a routine for these contract killings. Two masked men, they gun you down as the seat when you come out of your office to go to your car, and then they run to a getaway car, and later you find the getaway car in flames, because the modus operandi is that if you burn the car, there's no DNA, there's no fingerprints, the police can't track you down. Well, in the assassination, these very similar contract killing of Rapudaman Malik, the financier at one time of the Baba Khalsa, the terrorist group which blew up Air India in 1985, the wealthy businessman who was assassinated in July of last year. In that case, they did find the shooters pretty quickly. A couple of punks, goons with criminal records, but who paid them? Did they even know who paid the money? And they haven't identified who paid them, but they do have the shooters. But in this case, in Nijjar's case, they don't have the shooters. So if they have the shooters, tell me, how do they know who paid them? I mean, this is, it becomes rather difficult if you don't have that piece of evidence. So there's a hole in the middle of the hole of, in the middle of Trudeau's presentation. And if he can't fill it, and I would suggest rather quickly, he's going to be in a lot of trouble.
What are your sources saying about where the investigation is at this stage? I mean, like you said, the Prime Minister almost indicated that it's sort of concluded that India is guilty. Where do you think the investigation is at this stage?
Well, the best I can tell you for the record is this, that it would behoove all of us, I believe, to consider the possibility that motives may be mixed. Here's what I mean. In the main, to be crude about it, there are two theories. One is local gangland vendetta. The other is geopolitical masterminds in New Delhi send out hit squad of 007 diplomats to wipe out Khalistani figures around the world. What if it's a mixture of the two? What if you investigate the background of Mr. Malik, who we just discussed, and his assassination a year ago? Well, he's well known, and this is public information, to have written a letter, a gushing letter to Prime Minister Modi in January of last year, praising Modi for opening the door to Sikhs, for the wonderful work he's done for the Sikhs, a great friend of the Sikhs. An extraordinary letter coming from the financier of a terrorist group which attacked India by blowing up a plane in 1985 with the loss of 331 innocent civilians. This must have struck Mr. Malik's old friends in the Khalistan movement as treachery, and very dangerous too. If he will say that, what else will he say? This is very alarming from their point of view. And we also know, and it's on the record, there is a lawsuit laying out the dispute, a dispute over money, essentially, between Mr. Malik and Mr. Nijjar. And there is a television interview, but maybe the last one that he ever did, that Malik ever did, in which he is very uncomplimentary about Mr. Nijjar. So there was bad blood between them, let's put it that way. We also know that Mr. Nijjar was publicly not complimentary and was a rival of Mr. Malik. So the feeling was mutual. Now imagine that the problem with Malik's new friendship with the BJP and with Prime Minister Modi, even if it was reciprocated or not, who knows if Modi even knew about this letter. But what if that just happened to fit rather well, not just with the agenda of the Indian deep state, if you will, but also with the agenda of Mr. Malik's criminal rivals? What if in other words, if the two rival theories for Mr. Malik's death, what if they commingled? What if the motivation of revenge against Mr. Nijjar for allegedly arranging the death of Mr. Malik, what if that was combined? It just happened to be convenient. What if a couple of guys meet and one of them has friends at the Indian consulate and the other has friends in the Surrey underworld, and they both thought that it would be a good idea if Mr. Malik was taken out? And what if they both thought that Mr. Nijjar, in the wake of this, what if the Malik camp decided that taking Mr. Nijjar out would be a handy bit of revenge, and that fits the Indian deep state agenda as well? In other words, this rather murky stew, I realize this is hard to follow. It's based on speculation only. I offer it as a theory that is doing the rounds today. And that's my answer. It's something that we should consider. We can't prove it, but we should consider it. Now, imagine that Justin Trudeau's intelligence people were able to put flesh on those bones, were able to give a fuller account than I just gave of why Mr. Nijjar was assassinated. Well, that would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Right. Yeah, but the way you described it, and if the intelligence is able to finesse it in such a way that it becomes a
uh, actionable court case. Do you think
Yes.
it can seriously put the blame at India's door? Because it sounds so complicated. There is necessarily plausible deniability in it already.
Absolutely. I do not think that the theory, as I just laid it out in broad strokes,
Right.
it doesn't prove anything. Maybe two guys had lunch and maybe they didn't, and maybe it doesn't prove a damn thing. But I offer it simply as a possibility, which, if you did know more,
Right.
could explain, if you did have the details and the names and the places and the dates, which might fit the facts, and it might explain why intelligence people might say to the Prime Minister and to the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor, "Listen, we've cracked the case here, and we just need a few more pieces. We need to get the Indians to cooperate, and to get, and they're not cooperating, so we need to put the boot in." In order to get them to cooperate. Say, "Oh yeah, you don't want to cooperate? Well, how about if we go public with this? How are you like that?" And then you'll be in the position of having to deny it, and we've got enough to fry you.
Right.
Well, if that's the game that's being played, it's a risky game for Trudeau. It's a roll of the dice, and he's nowhere near yet winning it.
Right. At some stage, this will have to go to a court of law, right?
Yes.
Otherwise, it's
Yeah.
just a parliamentary statement of some dramatic effect. It means nothing eventually. So,
Absolutely, yes.
given your experience, what do you think Canadian court might see this as? As it stands now, do you think it has enough to respond to that seriously?
No, I mean, go back to where we started. If they don't even have the shooters,
Exactly.
and I doubt that the shooters would necessarily know who their paymaster was. I mean, believe it or not, people, find this hard to believe, but I mean, I've heard stories about literally a job board posted online saying, "We want to get rid of so and so. Do you want to bid on this job? A job of murder."
Right.
Contracting out murder on the internet without revealing who you are. Okay, it's going to be $30,000, and it's going to be half of it cash up front, and you get the other half when we see the body. And this is nasty stuff.
Right.
But on the basis of, "I've heard that this guy had lunch with that guy and they might have been behind," that's not a court case. And that could explain why there is no court case and there are no charges against anyone. But at the very least, you need to have the shooters. You need to have the actual goons who did the job. And in this case, in the Nijjar case, there were three of them. There were two masked men and one at the wheel of the getaway car, the other side of the park. They ran off down the park and then they drove off, and then you found the car in flames. So I don't think there's a court case yet.
Yeah, unless the investigators are really brilliantly hiding those three men, and they are going to prop them up when the time comes. This is astounding that without a single suspect, they are able to make a claim that they've made.
Yes, it doesn't. I mean, it simply doesn't hold water. I mean, it's not ready to go to court by any means.
Right.
What if they suspect somebody who is not in Canada's jurisdiction? That would explain things too, wouldn't it? Yeah. Because Canada would be unable to pursue the investigation to interview this guy or guys if they are in the bosom of India, if they've returned to Mother India, and they're not here, and the Indians don't want to give him up. Say, "No, we're not going to surrender him to the Canadians for interrogation. We're not going to agree to that." Well, that would explain why Trudeau felt driven to say, "Okay, in that case, I'm going public, and you'll feel the heat."
Right.
But at the moment, until he reveals what he's got, he's the one feeling the heat.
Exactly. Yeah. Attached to this is an interview I saw of Bob Rae, Canada's ambassador to the United Nations. He was on CBC where he says quiet diplomacy had proceeded before the Prime Minister chose to make this statement.
Yes.
Are you aware of that diplomacy,
Yes.
and what kind of information you think Trudeau might have furnished the Indian Prime Minister?
Well, he certainly would have to furnish some, and I think that Mr. Ray is correct, and he's in the know. But we all are, in this sense that the government has confirmed, the Canadian government has confirmed, and so has the US and the British governments, that they were, to a degree, we don't know precisely what that degree is, brought into the confidence of the Canadians, and that the Canadians prior to the G20 were already trying to work with the Indians, trying to persuade them to cough up, to give them help in their investigation, and must have been frustrated, or that's what it looks like, and also shared some information with the Five Eyes allies, to include obviously Canada, the US, UK, Australia, and the evidence suggests that the allies were reluctant to antagonize India at a time when India is of rising importance. Britain is on the cusp of a free trade agreement with India. Australia has just signed one, I believe. India is supposed to be the great new ally in the contest, of the geopolitical contest between the West and China. So this is not a good time to antagonize India. But B, the allies do say that they are not completely unimpressed by what the Canadians have offered. The Americans have said, for example, that they view with deep concern the information that Canada has presented. And the British Minister, Mr. Cleverly, has expressed similar, saying, you know, we've really got to get after this. We've got to have a full investigation, which, if indeed my theory that the Canadians encountered resistance from the Indians, that would fit. So it may be that this all hinges on something that the Canadians think the Indians are holding back. A name, or they have the name but they don't have the person, that they want to interview this person, and they want information about movements, travel, tickets, phone calls, wiretaps from the Indians in order to solve the case. And that having become suspicious about Indian motivations, having encountered resistance from the Indians, that the Canadians decided, okay, that's it. We've had enough of this fooling around. We're going to go to our allies and say, we want you to support us on this. Here's what we have, or some of it. And they said the same to the Indians, you know, we're going public if you don't cooperate. And that I think fits what we know. But we still have that hole in the heart of the presentation of the Prime Minister.
Right.
No evidence, none.
Yeah, if it's such a fiendish plot, let's say for the sake of argument that it is indeed an Indian plot, don't you think they would have gotten rid of the guys who carried out the hatchet job?
Well, the guy that carried out the hatchet job might not even be known to them. There may have been a broker in between, right? We're talking about a very dangerous murder, a murder that was going to cause waves in the case of Nijjar because of his position as the number 2 in Sikhs for Justice and the president of the temple, the Guru Nanak Temple in Surrey. He was somebody, at least locally. I mean, outside that,
Right.
Nobody knew who he was, but he was a significant figure. So it seems to me that if indeed my imaginary scenario of a couple of guys having lunch, one with links to the Indian government, however tenuous those links might be, and one with links to the criminal underworld, it makes sense that somebody might have brought them together. Okay, now I can't talk about who the client is, but the client, whoever it is, wants this man eliminated.
Right.
Can you arrange it? Okay, I can arrange it, and I'm not going to ask who the client is.
Right.
right? I mean, they're not exactly writing a legal contract, are they?
Not at all. No.
It's not even on the back of a napkin in the lunch
It doesn't
restaurant.
exist. Yeah.
No, it doesn't exist. Yeah. So, I mean, unraveling that is not going to be easy, but obviously Trudeau and his advisors believe that they've got persuasive evidence. They've got something, some nugget of information that suggests to them that there's an Indian government hand in this. And I'm merely speculating. The theory that I advanced to you, that which I think we ought to at least be open to, that we should consider it a possibility, is that Mr. Malik may have become identified with, as it were, the Indian government side, as bizarre as that may seem given his record. And the Air India bombing financier, that he should be considered on the Indian side. But as amazing as that might be, it's possible. And he did write that letter. That, by the way, I'm not revealing any secrets. That's a public that's public information. So we know that it did happen, and we know that he did cozy up to Prime Minister Modi and to his government, and got a visa to go and visit India, despite his background. He's off the blacklist. He's able to travel to India.
What are the odds that the U.S. intelligence may have tipped the Canadians off this?
Well, it's always a possibility because of the immense reach of the National Security Agency, the CIA, the American intelligence agencies, massively funded, massively capable, wiretapping thousands and thousands of lines all the time, able to then to go back in time and to replay the tape that may become interesting later on. Canada doesn't have those kinds of capabilities. I'm certainly open to the possibility that Canada may have learned some key piece of information, that so-and-so did indeed have a phone call with so-and-so else at the operative time when the deal might have been done to eliminate Mr. Nijjar. I think that's entirely possible, but none of this is definite. We are simply filling a vacuum with speculation, which to some degree is informed, the letter by Malik to Modi and so forth, the lawsuit between the Malik camp and the Nijjar camp, proof that there was bad blood between the two. There are bits of information, but none of it bearing directly on who paid and who carried out the killing of Mr. Nijjar. And that's the nub of it.
Right. Just last couple of things. One is whether or not this case goes the distance. Don't you think the Prime Minister's parliamentary statement has had the effect of bolstering the Khalistanis within Canada? Whether it's true or not, they will choose to believe that it's true.
Absolutely.
Isn't that a problem?
Yes, they're jumping for joy. I mean, they have been vindicated. They've been saying this all along, and now the government's on our side. They are cashing in. They're putting out press releases. They're saying this proves that we're right. The government has endorsed our point of view that we've said all along, that this was an Indian hit. And the skeptics like that awful guy, Terry Milewski on Twitter, has been saying the opposite. We proved him wrong, and we are victorious. We're marching to victory. We have the government on our side. So they've gone a little bit beyond where we are. They're exaggerating the scale of their victory, I think. But there's no question that the wind is in their sails. Yes, absolutely. And
so
that's
either
unfortunate.
Way, they are the winners. Either way, they are the winners.
Well, it depends how this ends. You know, they may regret some of those press releases if it turns out that Trudeau doesn't have the goods, or if he never does get to the point of being able to prove it, and this all becomes part of history as an unsolved mystery. I mean, that's possible too. You don't necessarily get a Hollywood ending.
Sure. Finally, why is it that Justin Trudeau did not take a similarly tough stand over years of Chinese interference, especially in the context of the two Canadians who were detained as hostage? He practically did nothing there.
Yes, it's a puzzle, isn't it? I share your curiosity about that, and I don't have a good answer, except to say that there is a history on both sides, that is the Chinese and the Indian side. The history on the Chinese side, of course, is that Trudeau's own father, Pierre Trudeau, was one of the pioneers of opening the West to the new communist China. He explored and traveled around China, wrote a book about it, became a bit of a hero in China because of his openness at the time when the West was saying, no, 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 we're going to have nothing to do with the Red Menace in China. And Pierre Trudeau took a different attitude and admired the Chinese. Trudeau is on record as having, the younger Trudeau, I mean, is on record as having similar feelings. He once indiscreetly said that he sort of admired, in a way, the Chinese dictatorship because they were able to get things done. He wasn't saying that he admired dictatorship, but it was an unfortunate phrase, which he has worn to his cost ever since. By contrast, there's always been a deep antagonism in some quarters in Canada towards the Indians. There was a long, decades-long dispute over nuclear technology, which didn't thaw out really. I think I was on that trip when Prime Minister Harper went to India, and I remember the press conference with Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, as he then was, in which that was finally put in the dustbin of history, that old dispute over India's alleged misuse of Canada's nuclear technology. Right. And we were going to march forward, and now we're going to have a free trade agreement, which now, of course, is on ice as a result of this latest fracas. So there is a difference in the historical background and the relationships between Canada and China, the Liberal Party and China, and the Indian case. Right. But that's only a partial explanation. It fills in the background a little bit, but it doesn't explain all of it. I mean, it doesn't explain why, for example, Pierre Trudeau turned Indira Gandhi down when she asked for the extradition of Talvinder Parmar for the murder of policemen in Punjab, and Canada said no. Why exactly did we say no? I mean, you've heard the story about how Canada told the Indians that, well, India doesn't recognize the Queen of Head of States, and so the extradition treaty doesn't apply. And I mean, it's just a piece of comedy. What's the Queen's got to do with this? You know, I mean, it just made no sense. And of course, that was 3 years before the Air India bombing, and he went on to blow up a civilian aircraft with 331 people died. Yeah, and so it's hard to explain why it's evolved this way, but it has. And here we are with the two nations now at daggers drawn, at least the two administrations. Yeah. I don't think that this is reflected within the popular feeling towards India, which across Canada is generally warm, I would say, because of the presence throughout Canada of a very large Indian diaspora. We've got over 800,000 Hindus in Canada, 770,000 Sikhs, and I mean they're all over Canada, and people know them. They're very successful, unusually successful as an immigrant community, with the exception of this small minority of Khalistanis within them, which have created no end of trouble.
Yeah, and finally, before I let you go, how do you see this travel advisory from New Delhi? That it's extremely dangerous to travel to Canada.
Yeah, it's all part of the tit. This won't be the end of it. This is part of the tit for tat. You expel our diplomat, we're expelling yours. By the way, the Indians didn't escalate. They didn't go all the way up to expelling the High Commissioner. They went one level down, and so it's a strictly equal expulsion, if that's the word. And similarly with the travel warnings, Canada moved first on that, warning Canadians about the dangers of travel to that terrible place, India. And so India has felt bound to reciprocate on that. Next, what about the visas? What about the Indian students studying in Canada? You know, there are 100,000 Indian students studying in Canada. I mean, you know, the integration of the peoples that proceeds apace. We had 35,000 Indians take Canadian citizenship last year. 35,000 in one year. So, I mean, we're becoming an Indian country, and as fast as we're becoming an Asian country. I mean, we also had thousands and thousands of Chinese. So Canada is changing. The face of Canada is changing, and some of it has an Indian flavor.
So as long as Justin Trudeau remains, there is next to no possibility of India-Canada relations improving in the foreseeable future.
Oh no, it's gonna no. I mean, it's hard to see how this gets repaired. Okay. I mean, I mentioned the squabble over nuclear technology. I mean, that lasted the better part of 30 years. I'm not suggesting that this is going to go on that long, because once Trudeau departs the scene, it'll be a clean break. We can start afresh, assuming that if the Conservatives take over, that they do not go the same route as the Liberals have done vis-a-vis India, and that they make an effort to mend fences with India. I'm assuming that would be the case, but we can't guarantee it. So far, we haven't heard much from the Conservative leader other than a vaguely supportive statement that if this is all true, then it's a terrible thing, and condolences to Mr. Nijjar's family and so on. So that we can't guarantee that the Conservatives will radically alter the picture, but it can't get much worse, can it?
No. On that note, Terry, great pleasure. I'm sure you're tired of answering the same questions. I tried to keep them very different. Hope that worked.
It did work. Yes, they're not all the same. They're not all the same, and I thank you for that.